Snaptech IT is the expert go-to resource for all things CMMC, education, certification, preparation, and ongoing managed IT. Manage, secure, grow. Check it out at snaptechit.com.
Hi there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of 123 CMMC. My name is Dana Mantilia, and I will be your host today. And our guest is Carl Bickmore. Welcome, Carl. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How are you, Dana?
Good. Carl is with Snaptech IT. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your company?
Well, I'm one of the original founders of our organization. Used to be chief cook and bottle washer, as they say, but we've grown through the years, and we operate a managed IT company that focuses on the defense industrial base and organizations needing security and compliance in their IT, with locations in San Francisco, Phoenix, Arizona, and Atlanta, Georgia.
Fantastic. All right. So today we're going to talk about some acronyms maybe and some words associated with CMMC. So first of all, out of the gate, why don't you talk about the name and what it kind of stands for?
I think this is great, Dana, because I feel like a lot of terms get thrown around, and a lot of them are abbreviated, and people just rip them out like everybody should know them. So I'm glad we're taking a minute to look at some of these terms. So yeah, the cybersecurity model maturity model certification. Let me try that one more time. Cybersecurity maturity model certification. That's why we say CMMC, I think. I'm pretty sure. It's a Department of Defense cybersecurity requirements that are now put out there for organizations that are related to the defense industrial base to follow in order to protect the supply chain and to make sure that we aren't putting our country, our society at risk through cybersecurity events such as a hacking event or a ransomware event or stealing of controlled unclassified information or even classified information, whatever it may be. So it's this overarching new standard that's been put out there.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we're going to hear more and more about it. So moving forward, so this crazy C3PAO that everybody attributes to Star Wars. So what exactly is this?
Well, yeah. So it's a really short way of saying Certified Third Party Assessment Organization. So C3P assessment AO. And basically, one of the things that's really different about the CMMC program itself is they've decided to implement an accreditation board, the CMMC AB organization, which is basically training up people to become assessment or organizations or assessment providers. And so C3PAO is a loving way of saying these are the folks that are going to come to your location to help you get certified. They'll actually perform the formal audit and give you your rating, and that would then be usable for you to provide to your prime subcontractors and participate in contracts that require a certain level of rating. So those are the folks that actually do the assessments formally for the process.
And they're also the ones that help people too, right? To try to get ready for the CMMC, but you can't use the same one for the actual audit. So you have to hire somebody else to help you. It doesn't have to be a C3PAO, but you can't hire the same company to help you and then assess you. So that's something for people to think about.
Yeah, a lot of folks are registered providers or registered provider organizations, like our organization is an RPO, and RPOs. That's their sole job, is to help folks prepare for the certification, to go through the necessary steps, and that's where Snaptech IT sits. We're not aspiring to become auditors. We feel that somebody else can take that role. So the C3PAOs are the auditing organizations, and yes, they could consult on helping an organization prepare, but the same organization that prepares and consults can't be the auditing organization. That's right.
Gotcha. Okay, well, let's see here now. So let's talk about FCI for a minute.
Well, probably the two things that most manufacturers or folks in the defense industrial base deal with, there are really two things that they deal with: is the FCI and the COI. And so the first is federal contract information. And basically, this is meant to be protected information. It's mildly sensitive information. It's not legitimate plans of some classified device that may be you're manufacturing a component for. But the fact of the details of the contract itself is considered sensitive. And so FCI is one of the protected forms of data that needs to be monitored and kept control of, and make sure isn't leaking out to the wrong places. So federal contract information, basically what's the contract deal, who's it with, what's being contracted for, the amounts, and so forth.
All right, and so what is CUI versus FCI?
Yeah, so CUI is the one that's even more sensitive, because controlled unclassified information, CUI, is the information that is sensitive. It's not the same as fully classified information, but it is definitely information that is sensitive, and it's typically going to be things like drawings that are used in a manufacturing plant, or instructions, or some other form of information that needs to be controlled. And this information is shared with, the downstream subcontractors, and it is probably the number one thing. Well, both FCI and CUI are important, but CUI is the number one thing is being asked to be protected in this process of the CMMC certification.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll get into a little bit how exactly you find that. So first, so what's the difference between level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5? What's level 1?
Yeah, you bet. Well, so one of the things about the CMMC is there are 130 different IT controls that you have to be looking at on a regular basis. And there are different standards for the implementation of those controls. And so basically, they recognize that not every organization needs to adopt the CMMC certification or the CMMC standard at the same level or with the same rigor. And so they've broken it into 5 implementation levels. So maturity level 1 is just considered basic hygiene. There are only 17 of the 130 controls required at this level, and you're allowed a little bit more leeway. But just to be clear, though, you probably could only be operating with FCI in order to only do maturity level 1, because as soon as you have CUI or other information, you're required to operate at a higher level. But it's a great place to start, and that's how you would do it. Is you would first look for level 1 certification and then move on to further levels afterwards. So start there and then move into other levels if that's required for the contracts you work with.
So I'm assuming that a level 1 would be somebody that, like, for example, the people that are working, the painters, or people that are building things, or people that have a government contract where they're providing a service, but it's not related to anything with the controlled unclassified information, but they're still going to need to have something. So they're still going to need to have some basic cybersecurity.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, so the folks that are contracted to do various things for the somewhere in the defense industrial base, but that are not actually seeing, plans for a device or a piece of equipment. So typically FCI is as far as their information goes. That might need to be protected. And here's the other thing. If you're not doing these basic hygiene things and operating a business today, really in any form, and whether you're in the defense industrial base or not, you really should be looking hard at how you're operating your IT, because this is considered very basic stuff that really anybody should be doing.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Whether you're in the dealing with the government or not dealing with the government, these are just good business practices. Mm-hmm. So now we get into a little bit more. So obviously we kind of skip level 2. That's a transitional level. So then you hop over to level 3, and then this is what are we dealing with at level 3?
Yeah, so just really quickly, in level 2, more controls are added, documentation standards go up, audit standards go up. But by the time you hit to 3, which is what it looks like most people are going to be looking to do, if they have a CMMC requirement, a lot of folks need to be eyeing level 3, particularly ones that are subcontractors to prime. Now, the primes are probably going to have to look at the 4 and the 5s and some of the other ones, but your average subcontractor to a prime probably needs to be looking at level 3, which is considered not basic, but rather good hygiene. More documentation is required. And this is the level that if you're using or coming in contact with controlled unclassified information, CUI, this is where you need to be eyeing for your implementation. And to be perfectly frank, if you haven't started on this process, just to make it super clear, this is not the kind of thing that you can just go hire a consulting company and in a couple of months you've now met level 3. It's probably a multi-year process for most folks. And so if you are thinking that by say 2023 or 2024 you want to be at level 3, you probably should have already started in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point, and that's what we always like to tell everybody. This is going to take time, so don't wait until the very last minute. If you say, "Oh, well, we're not included in this just yet," well, you are definitely going to be included in it before 2026. So the earlier you can get started on this, the better off it's going to be. And I think also it's going to help with the cost, because if you're not like rush, you can kind of lay out a plan and then follow that plan and take little chunks of things at one step at a time, as opposed to just trying to let's get ourselves certified for this. So.
Yeah, well, and the thing about this is look, there's plenty of machine shops out there and other forms of manufacture that work in the industrial base that have really not been very sophisticated in their IT. And to be perfectly frank, this is really asking them to come to a level that really they should want anyway, to avoid business disruption, to avoid the problems that come with cybersecurity events. And the nice other benefit of this is this means that you can now participate in contracts that have CUI that needs to be sent. And so this is a good spot to eye, and frankly, even this is good IT as well, which is nice. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, good stuff. So now let's just what is legacy? This is a good thing to explain to everybody.
Yeah, you'll see the legacy term thrown around. I mean, look, it means what it sounds like. It's things that's old, right? And so if you have old equipment, old software doesn't meet the current standards, it's referred to as legacy. And basically, legacy equipment's a liability, and that's the message you have to have. So you need to be looking at your asset management and making sure that you're not continuing to work with legacy equipment.
What happens though, like for example, what happens, bless you, what happens if, let's say somebody in a manufacturing plant, they have some software program that only runs on XP? What do they do in those situations?
That's a great question. I mean, really there's a lot of things that you can do to try to work with it. I mean, the best thing you can do is see what you can do to work with the manufacturer and see what the options are. Ultimately, in the worst case scenario, you may really have to, to be certified and to become, really protected, you may end up needing to actually do some machine replacement. But the reality of it is there are other choices that you can do prior to that may help in the process. For instance, if that equipment doesn't need to come in contact with CUI, you can go through a process of identifying your data flow, where CUI comes in and out of your organization, and you can define such said equipment as segmented and out of scope for CMMC. Now, the key thing is your IT people need to do a really good job of making sure it's segmented, that a machine that can have CUI on it cannot come in contact with this machine from a data standpoint. And so if that machine were to become compromised, they would not be able to spread laterally to find systems that have CUI on them. So network segmentation and scoping can be a really big deal in this process, because if you can set up your environment in such a way that legacy equipment like that does not come in contact with CUI and is protected from it and segmented, then you can still achieve certification. You just need to set up the correct scoping process and document it well and test it well on a regular basis.
Well, that gives everybody a little bit of hope, because I'm sure there's going to be some legacy stuff out there that people are going to say, well, what am I going to do with this? And now they have an answer now. That's good. They can still use it. They just have to separate it, which brings us into our next question, which is talking about scope. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so I think the key element is in order to make the right choices for your organization to pass your CMM certification, good, smart scoping can make an enormous difference on the level of resources that you need to invest in the solution and in the process, and the amount of time that it will take. Because if you can create systems and segmentations and rules and restrictions that effectively reduce all the places that CUI and FCI can be accessed, you can significantly reduce the number of systems that need to follow all of the controls and all of the documentation and all of the auditing. So it can mean the difference between something that takes 100 hours and 10 hours as an example, just depending on how you do it. From a frame of reference, or maybe another way to say it is you could reduce your scope and reduce the amount of CMMC work 10% of what it would take if everything in your organization was in scope. So it's really hard to say how it will work out for everybody individually, but smart scoping is a big deal in reducing the amount of resource and the amount of equipment and the changes that you'd have to make.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an excellent point. And that's the sooner they can get started on that, the better off they are too, because the more they can start making their scope smaller and smaller and smaller, again, it's going to affect how much money they're going to have to spend and how much time they're going to need to dedicate to that. So anyway, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, look, here's the thing. When an assessor is ready to come and assess your organization, one of the first things they're going to want to do is see a clearly defined scope document of what systems are in the documentation, and they need it to be justified. You have to be able to explain to them why it's comprehensive and correct. But if you can do that and have that scoping documents correctly lined up, then they'll come and do the assessment according to your scope. Otherwise, you can assume the scope is all IT systems, all equipment, and so forth, so on.
We don't want to do that. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. I'm so happy that you were able to help shed some light on some of these lovely acronyms and terms that are getting tossed around all over the place, and some people don't know what they mean. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
All right, Carl. Well, hopefully we'll see you around again on our next episode. So thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Dana. Good to see you again.
You too.
Snaptech IT is the expert go-to resource for all things CMMC. Education, certification, preparation, and ongoing managed IT. Manage, secure, grow. Check it out at snaptechit.com.